7:04, we are live. Couple minutes. It's all good though, right? It's a couple minutes between friends, just hanging out. Today we're going to talk about a couple things. One, this is related. If you look at the thumbnail on this video, I can show you that in a few minutes. You can take a look. It is the factory long runner EFI intake manifold for the Gen 6 454. The previous generation, the Gen 5 stuff, they had a throttle body injection, which, like a carburetor, has cooling. It works fairly well. Has a dual plane style intake manifold. It's actually fairly effective. When they went to the Gen 6, they went to port injection, individual port injection, which probably is easier to get, maybe better fuel mileage, improved emissions, that kind of thing. But the question is that intake manifold that they use if you look at it's a two-piece intake manifold, and I had both pieces. I was going to put that photo up, but this one kind of shows, it has a throttle body inlet, it's a side inlet, more like a Ford than the front mounted for the tune port. But the bottom is a cross ram, and then it wraps back up and then crosses back over again. But as I indicated in the description, there's a little twist on this one, which I think is interesting, and it's kind of something that I would like to test. I'd like to extend the divider in it, because if you look at the way that the intake manifold comes, it does what a tune port does, and it, starting at the port and working backwards, it would go out and wraps back around. But what they do is they merge two runners together into a common opening. I think that they're doing that for space constraints and for packaging. But it's interesting. I would kind of like to see if we continued the divider, and the divider's not all the way up. So if we continued the divider all the way up and can continue the divided intake ports, I think we might see more low speed torque. But obviously the engineers were doing what engineers do, and they know a great deal more than I do, because a lot of times we're looking at stuff going, well, how can we make more power? But they're never looking at that. They already know, oh, this is already going to make as much as we need, even when we detune it with, all the things that we talk about, running it hot, a very conservative timing and fuel tune. And by the way, they didn't do that or they don't do that on the factory ECUs. They don't do that because they don't know how to tune. I get that comment a lot from guys that are, keyboard warriors, guys that are, I'm a tuner. Look how much better I did than the factory. You don't know more than the factory, and you're not better than the factory. The factory did what the factory did for a specific reason that had nothing to do with making more power. They have to make it so that, like I said, and I've said many times, so that the guy, you know who you are, wants to lug the thing in fifth gear at 1500 RPM going up a grade. They have to be a plan for that. They have to make sure that this thing won't hurt itself. They have to make it foolproof. They will have to make sure that that the motor doesn't hurt itself, because they warranty these things. They have to make it so that it doesn't hurt itself and detonate itself to death when somebody, and more than one somebody's going to do this, when they drive it improperly and do what they can to put it in a position to hurt itself, to detonate itself. And so they have to make it so they have to put fail safes in there so that doesn't do that. And having a mild tune is part of that. And also being able to run it on every octane fuel that's available, because I put 87 in my truck. That's what I drive around in. I don't race my truck around, but I run 87 on it unless I'm towing something. Then I put 91 in it. Might be no reason for doing that. I just feel better. I just feel better, pulling it up grades or whatever when we were towing the boat and stuff. I just feel better doing that. But they have to make it safe to run on 87 octane, because lots of people are going to do that. Some people might run other, mid-grade or 91 or 93 other places in the country. They may do that, but they might not. So you have to assume the worst, and that's what the engineers are doing. And the same thing with this design. If they wanted to make more power, they know how to make big block power. It's not like that escaped them. But I just think it would be cool to try some different things on this manifold and see what we can do with the power, because I haven't played a lot with the factory EFI Gen 6 manifold. Normally we'd take them off and we'd throw them away. We don't do that anymore, because I don't buy things from the wrecking yard just to throw them away, because now they charge you for everything, which is, It's frustrating. But at the same token, I shouldn't be buying things and getting them for free and then just throwing them away, because there is value to all those things. And so if there's value and they can sell them, then that's, that's kind of part of the American way. The video that I put up is interesting because we compared the Gen 6 454 both in fuel injected form, because I'd run it with a stock fuel injection. We ran it with a Holley, just stuck a lock distributor in there, ran it with a Holley universal harness, hook up the distributor, and are controlling the factory injectors. We may have put other injectors in there, and we at least took the stock ones out and cleaned them to make sure that they were working, because at the stock power level, they'll support the stock power level without any problem. And we just optimized the tune and stuff, and this is what we got. And then it's an interesting comparison between and I included this in the video, it's an interesting comparison between the factory long runner EFI manifold and a dual plane. And the dual plane, not surprisingly, does well compared to the EFI intake manifold. It's a little softer down low, a little better on the top. And I honestly I thought it was an RPM air gap that we tried, but I've run a few different ones. And I'd actually like to try the different now in going back. All I cared about is that we had a dual plane on. But I think we've run Wyand stuff, and we've run the offshore knockoff stuff, and we've run the Edelbrock stuff. Whatever I had laying around, we ran. And I didn't pay much attention to it. I'd like to see how the divided dual planes do against the undivided dual planes and that kind of stuff, and just run a real test on that and see. I don't expect big changes in the 5,000 RPM range, from 2,000 or whatever to 5,000. I don't expect big changes there, but I'd like to see something. I'd like to see what it does so that we can talk about that at some point, because the divider is definitely going to make a difference. Usually the divider makes more of a difference on the ends of the scale. So at the beginning, it tends to have less carb signal and require more jetting, because it's making it act a little bit more like a single plane, not totally a single plane, still a dual plane, but it changes the signal to the carburetor. It usually requires more fuel, and then it usually makes more power on top, kind of in the same way that a small open spacer does. So I'd like to do more of that testing. But the comparison in the video was about the 454, which I use all the time, to the 8.1 496, both run in stock trim, and then after we installed camshafts in them. And the camshafts were similar. The ZZ502 was a 224 234, and the 276 cam was a 224 230, I think. So similar kinds of things. Obviously, on the bigger motor, the same camshaft, if we were to run the same camshaft on them, would be effectively milder on the bigger motor than it is on the smaller one. So it would tend to make power at a higher engine speed on the smaller motor than it would on the bigger motor. And we see a little bit of that. We saw that, and I pointed that out kind of at the end of the video, that it looked like the 496, the power curve was kind of tapering off at a faster rate than the 454 was. So my question and comment to people was that the long runner intake? Was it the camshaft is milder because this is just effectively bigger? Is it a head flow? What is it? What do you guys think it is? And honestly, there's no way to answer that unless we start doing individualized testing and find out which one of those things actually it did. And then maybe we could swap the cams and see, because the ZZ502 is probably a little bit bigger. Although I don't know what the lobe separation angle is on the ZZ502. I couldn't find that. I did a lot of searching online and couldn't find that. I think when Chevrolet or Mercury Marine or whoever did that, they didn't ever provide it to anybody. And so that information isn't out there. I had people tell me that they think that they know what it is, but nobody ever showed me any kind of cam card that said, hey, look, it's this, here are the valve events and here's what's happening. But at any rate, it should be fairly comparable. And the ZZ502 was a good cam upgrade on the 496. It improved power everywhere. I didn't run it all the way down at 2,000 RPM, but judging by the fact that we picked up power below 2,500 with the comp cam on the 454, that kind of tends to lead me in the direction that camshaft on the bigger 496 is probably still going to be making at least as much as the stock cam down at like 2,000. And I suspect, I don't know if it will be more, but it should be, it shouldn't be less. There's a lot of times when we put camshafts, there'll be crossovers. So the bigger cam will make less than the smaller cam at some point. I don't know that we reach that on the 496, but it'd be interesting to see. The other thing that I've been toying around with is figuring out a way to do a manifold on an LS so that I can mount. I want to run a tune port on something, because I was doing what I do in my spare time, the 4 minutes I have every day to have spare time. I was looking at the torque numbers, and this is probably going to be a video, because looking at the torque numbers for a lot of times, guys will argue, the LS guys or small block guys and LS guys will argue about which one makes more torque, a 5.3 or a 350. And to me, that seems to be a fairly simple thing, especially down low. If you're talking about 2,000 RPM and 2,500 to 3,000, even 3,500, a bigger motor should have an advantage there. But does like the thing that I wish I would have, the data that I wish I had for something like that, is I have never run the factory L31, the Vortec headed deal. I've never run that particular intake manifold. I've run dual planes on stuff a lot. And if we ran a dual plane, we can't. And if we run a dual plane on an LS, it does do pretty well on low speed power. The dual plane actually is surprisingly well. But I'd like to see, like, who is the low speed torque king. And a 350 compared to a 326 inch motor definitely has an advantage. We saw that on the 302, 327, and 350. But the king seems to be the tune port stuff. And then I started looking at the 305 version, and the 305 doesn't do nearly what the 350 did in terms of low speed torque production. Like, the difference between where it made the horsepower and the torque difference was quite a bit more skewed. It's just interesting. I've been looking at this low speed torque thing, and I kind of got fixated. I need to start doing other things, but that probably will also be a video, because the tune port stuff is just kind of neat. I wanted for a long time, when I was doing that L99, when we put the tune port on that with Jim, shout out to Jim over at TPIS. I wanted to do a double plenum and a double runner, and just, a Klingon warship, all kinds of cool stuff, just weird stuff that I thought people would like, because then you have dual throttle bodies, and it looks super cool. And I figured out how I was going to extend the flanges and weld and make that stuff, and it was just it would be a gee whiz thing, not be. I mean, it might certainly, especially on that small motor, might help it make torque like down at 2,000 RPM, but a tune port, I don't think any tune port motor needs like another 6 or 8 inches of rudder length, but we never know. It'd be cool stuff. So our poll would be, we'll wait that. Should I modify? So I modify the factory Gen 6 454 intake to try in an attempt to, increase torque production. We'll ask our community. Scroll back and see what you guys are doing. Say what's up. Shiloh, what's up? What do you need help with? Nashville's in the house. Is that where Graceland is? Is there Graceland in Nashville? What should I do to boost my 97 automatic GT boost? You should. I mean, you've already answered your own question. That's the best way. In an automatic, converter gears go a long way. I have lots of 4.6 2-valve modifications. If you're going to do cams, I would stay with small ones. Ported heads help quite a bit. But blowers and turbos and nitrous, oh my, would definitely be the way to go. Houston's in the house. You need some help with the build? Well, you come to the right place. Tell us what you're trying to do, how much power you're trying to make, what you're trying to use, and we'll steer you in the right direction. 78 CJ5 with a 258 inline 6 and 1-barrel carb. Like the turbocharger. I'm not sure how to make it blow through and run an E85. It would be easier to make it a draw through. You might try a draw through on that because it would act as intercooling. You just have to get the right adapter for it, or a side draft carburetor like a Weber or something would be kind of cool on that. It'd be easier going into the turbo. And at low boost, it should work fantastic. You just have to get a turbo that has the right carbon seal on it. Or I have run a blow through on the 2-barrel Holley carburetor, but it only worked at wide open throttle. Reloading your other lugger. Stock LS41 wide open throttle tune is mid bottom 12.0 fuel. I like 12.8 to 13. That's great. If you take a look at the video that I did where we did 11 to 1 and 12 to 1, 13 to 1, you'll see that between 12 to 1 and 13 to 1, the gains are this much. DF, what's up? I'd be interested to get flow data on the most popular sizes of stock and aftermarket TPI and LS throttle bodies. 48, 52, 58 versus a 75, 78, and 102. I think I have. I remember the Excels were 1,000 CFM, the dual 58s, I think. And 102 is more than that. You need to do a video on a 489 on boost. A 489 big block Chevy, I have lots of those up. I know, let's make some noise, right? What would you do with direct injection to clean the valves? You need to introduce something else to clean the valves. Couldn't they just have a port injection? Yeah, the port injection, having both like GM did on the ZR1 Corvette engine is a good idea. But you could also spray, if you have an EcoBoost, a water meth injection is a good idea for that because it will help clean the valves. Is a head flow in the Gen 7 much better than the Gen 6? I don't know. I don't have a direct comparison that I like. Admiral, I'm thinking of putting a 5.4 short block on my Mark for NA absurdity. Does it fit in that engine bay pretty well? You should pick up a spare and modify it the other way. Car peeps, can we post pictures? I do respond to Facebook and Instagram. I have both of those. 400 small block with tune port should make good torque. It should, and I've run it on a 383. I've never done a 400. Cut up a cheap single plane and build a 20+ inch runner or big block Chevy. I don't think we need to start with a single plane to do that. I can't compare a Gen 1 small block Chevy versus an LS. Not comparable unless they both have the same valve angle in the heads. That's actually not true. It's very easy to compare them because we don't have to have the same valve angle. Well, we're not comparing equivalent displacements and equivalent valve angles and equivalent intake manifolds and equivalent, cylinder heads and cam timing and compression and putting windage trays on both of them. We're not trying to make them the same. We're trying to show the differences and we're celebrating the differences. One of them has way more displacement than the other one. I mean, if you compare a 350 to a 5.3, a better comparison might be, and I looked up this too, is a 350 to an LS1. It's at least 346 cubic inches. So the gains that would be like saying you can't compare a small block, an original small block, to a flathead because of the valve angle. Yeah, you can. They made it better and on purpose. And the LS, they made it better. And with the LT and direct injection and variable cam timing and lots of compression, they made it better. And that's part of us, growing in technology and getting better. Burnsy. How much time do you run on the Gen 6? I think it was 29 degrees, if I remember correctly. What cams you recommend for an F-150 4.6 liter? Like I said, I'd put the smallest one. So that's like the 262 cams from Comp. There may be others now. And back when I was doing the testing, there were no other cams available for it. It brings up a good point. I'm at 12.4 to 1 compression, was regretting not going to 13 to 1, but the gain would probably have been minimal. Yeah, I mean, Steve Brule would yell at you for not going more compression because he thinks in the 11 to 12 to 1 range, it's just a waste of time. If you're going to put compression in, put compression in it and make it a compression like race gas only kind of motor or E85 in today. Back then it would have been, race gas. Otherwise, don't do it. Make it 9 or 10 to 1 because he doesn't like that middle range. That means you still have to use good gas, but you're not getting the gains from what you could be with good gas. But yeah, the difference between 12.4 and 13 to 1 is less than going from 11 to 12 to 1 because you're getting in the diminishing returns. If you drove my truck, you'd understand 6.5 first gear. What transmission is it? And a 456 gear. Yeah, so but you should be all RPM then, right? It'd be nice to compare a 346 to a 350 and make everything the same. How do we make everything the same? There's no long runner intake manifold for a small block Chevy. They have different valve angles. There's no reason to try to make one that's not that into the other thing. You want to compare one thing the way that it ran and the other thing the way that it ran. And then if you want to modify them with, ported heads and cams and intake manifolds that apply to those specific things, I think that that's a good test. But I don't 100% do not agree with trying to make a 350 into an LS because there's no reason to do that. Richard, I finally caught your live feed. I'd like to bust the myth about torque production down low. Bill David Vizard's 350 small block roller versus flat tap it with a comparable Ultradyne hydraulic flat tap gain. So what is it you're trying to bust? I don't understand. So you want to say that flat tappet cams make more low speed power than roller cams do? How much compression can you run in E85? You can run all the compression you could put in an LS on E85 if it's an NA motor. Glenn, see your Facebook message for 8.1 intake you could test. Somebody sent me a request, but I didn't know. I asked them if they had an intake manifold, but because I went and looked at their page, and so has anybody heard of Veraram Industries? They wanted to know if I wanted to test one of their things, but when I went to their website or whatever, all I saw were air intake systems, which are not going to be a very good test on the engine dyno. That'd be much better in the car because in the car we have all the heat and stuff associated with it, and they probably would be more restrictive. The factory ones would certainly be more restrictive, but I don't have all of that stuff to run on the engine dyno. Your last video with a stock 2-barrel video, the Magnum 274 would have been a better choice, or the Comp XFI would have been a better choice for what? You don't know what we were trying to get done, so you can't say that. Verirams are pretty solid cold air intakes into that circles. I've heard nothing but good things about them. I remember Brian Tooley talking to me about them. But like I said, it would be a much better test on a chassis dyno than on an engine dyno because it's not it's not in the car with all the things that are going around. It's like a ram air. The air intake is in front of the radiator. Yeah, that's where the factory Corvette and stuff. That's where they grab it from. I can cruise in third gear. It's a Muncie SM 465, clunkiest shifting thing. That's the thing about having all of that gearing for it's. Are you driving around in a dump truck or something? What is it? What is this thing that you're driving around in? How's our poll doing? 90% saying yes. Should I modify that Gen 6? I'd like to. I think it would be cool, and it'd be pretty easy to stick a divider in there and not hurt anything. I'm going to go to yes, it's all RPM. Yep. Could you just put a spacer under the upper intake for the Gen 6? You might be able to machine one out that is all of that lower stuff, but let's see. But that would be an expensive way to do it. What I'm talking about is sticking a thin piece of metal in there. It'd be a lot easier. So let's see if you guys can see this. You can kind of get an idea of what's going on there. That's the upper and the lower portion. So if you did spacers in there, it'd be fairly involved. And you could see, like on these big ones, like on this right here, on this right here, the two from the other side come across and merge into that big one, and they do that on each side. So it's kind of interesting. Richard, another which turbo is best question. What do you think is the most responsive turbo I can make 600 crank horsepower with? Engines LQ4, the 706 head, and a truck Norris cam. I don't think you're gonna have any problem making having turbo response. If you put a GT45 on that, it's going to be very, very responsive, and you're going to make, and 600 crank horsepower is going to be really, really easy. Having turbo response is not going to be your issue with the 6-liter. Definitely put it at DF. You're assuming, and I go through this with when I have discussions with the advisor a lot too. You're assuming that what we did in that test, or that what we would do in any test, is looking for maximum power. That we went out of our way to try to select a camshaft that would make the most power of any camshaft. And that's never the thing that we're trying to do. Just like with the of any of my testing, just like with the OEM manufacturers, when they make a camshaft for the stock motor, that's not what they're doing. That's not their goal. And this wasn't my goal. My goal was to not try to do a custom cam or anything like that. My test was, we ran this camshaft, and if you run this camshaft, here's what will happen. Here are cylinder heads. When we run these cylinder heads and you put them on your motor in this configuration, this is what will happen. Same thing with a carburetor, same thing with an intake manifold. We're not, I am almost never, other than when I did Engine Masters, which was quite exhausting. I'm never trying to make the most power possible. I know that that's ingrained in a lot of people. I'm trying to show people what happens when they pick popular stuff and how much power they make when they get that thing. And then they can decide, is this worth it? People that come on and tell me, well, this one would be a lot better, completely miss what's going on with the channel. That's not it. Definitely put it that 12.8 to 13 is worth probably 3 horsepower at the most over 12.0, but every 100th count. Yeah, if you're racing, you need to do the spicy tune. 91 dually, mostly a work truck hauling stuff to the dump. Home Depot runs, definitely needs boost. Well, what's with the gearing in that thing then? Underdog, I haven't watched those videos, but you told me what kind of power they're making, right? I don't know what I'm going to learn from watching the thing make a run on the dyno or whatever. I'm going to go to live chat, though. Richard, have you ever built a quarter-mile race car? No, I don't. I haven't done drag race specific cars. You think you could weld up an aluminum rectangle box and cut out the gasket shape for in between the manifold on the Gen 6? No, I know how to make a spacer, but putting a spacer, two spacers in between there is way more involved. I'm talking about something that's going to take me less than an hour to do the test. I'm not interested in building a spacer in between those two. That's to cut that out to either water jetted or laser jetted or whatever. That's going to be way too much work. That's way too involved. Because it's only going to be a one-off thing that I'm then going to throw away, and it doesn't make sense to spend all that time and money to get when I can get the answer. And this is a perfect segue. When I can get the answer much cheaper and much quicker, and much more likely for the do-it-yourself guy. This is like the discussion that we had the other night, where we're trying to introduce calculus into figuring out the area under the curve. And I understand it because I took calculus in high school and in college, but that's not the question. The question isn't whether. A lot of times guys will come on, especially engineers will come on and try to impress us with, their level of understanding and their knowledge and their math skills and stuff. But what people need to realize is you need to figure out not just that. Okay, you can get that if we figure out, if you draw lines all the way down from each end of the curve and then you want to calculate everything that's happening in the middle there, you can do that. And you can use a complicated formula to do that. But what is that going to tell you? It's not going to give you any more information than average power production is going to give you, because it's exactly the same thing in terms of deciding whether or not the motor is effective. And so we have these conversations a lot, like rod ratio and rod length and golf ball dimples and all. We talk about these little esoteric things that there's a much easier thing. There's much more bigger things for us to talk about. The rod connects the crankshaft to the piston. It makes it go, and then they go up and down, and however long the stroke is on the crank and however big the piston is, those are the big things. The thing that's in the middle there, not one of the big things. In my opinion, the Truck Norris is small for an LQ4 with a turbo. I think you'd want more RPM for turbo fun. I disagree. You can run to 6,500 pretty easily with a Truck Norris and a turbo and a 6-liter. I think softening it up and making more power at the top, I would definitely do if it's an NA motor. A Truck Norris would not be my choice for an NA motor unless it's a daily driver. Then I might think about that, and the stock converter kind of thing. Then I might think about that, but otherwise I probably would not. But on a turbo thing, you can have all the power that you want, in the 6,000 RPM range. +3 intake and cam. Try to look and see here. Where is that? Where are those truck cam tests? Here we go. So peak power with like a stage 2 truck cam, which a Truck Norris would be similar on a 6-liter, is 5,800. And at 6,500, it was down. At 6,400, it was only down 10 horsepower. So with the turbo, that's still going to be that. Like to me, I think it's still going to be very usable there. Was wondering what you think about surviving on the street versus a couple pulls on the dyno where they say they can survive more. I don't think I've ever done any sort of thing. This was the argument the guys made about doing the big bang stuff. When we ran the stuff on the turbo stuff on the dyno, we ran 70 pulls on the motor that were over 1,000 horsepower. So it wasn't that it survived one pull and then we called it good. That's not real. And also, I would argue that the load imposed on the dyno is way more than it is on the car. You're never loaded for as long in the car as you are on the dyno. Never. I mean, anybody taking a trip down a quarter mile, you're loading and unloading the motor as you go through each gear. The stationary load on a dyno during the initial load, and then the length of time that we run that is longer than any quarter mile thing. And if you take more than 15 seconds or whatever to run a quarter mile, you're not going to be worried about injuring the motor because you're not making enough power. So the street and the track, I don't think are as hard on it as the engine dyno is. The one thing that does change is when we're doing these extreme loads or greater loads, let's say on the engine dyno, and for a longer period of time, we are doing it in an optimized environment, though, which you're not doing on the street or at the track. We don't have the temperatures that you do. We have better air temperature. We have better airflow over the motor. We have usually more exhaust flow. We don't have some of the restrictions a lot of times from accessories and things. But the air heat and the water temperature are the big drawbacks are the big differences, I think. Josh, if I do a draw through style, what I would do is if the motor's already together, I would work on getting the turbo working and make that work with a stock cam. Because honestly, it'll be easier to do with a cam that's a 206 cam in that motor on a 111. A 111 in that motor is going to have a little bit of an idle. You're going to know that you have a cam in that. I would just do it with a stock cam. And then the nice thing is if you think you need more power or you want more chop, then you could put a cam in it. My guess is if you run that motor and you get it working properly with a stock cam and a turbo, what the cam is going to do is another pound or two of boost. Years ago, I made 270 wheel horsepower and 380 foot-pounds on a 2000 Chevy 3500 with the bolt-on 454 Vortex. So in 2000, it would have been a Gen 6. At least 99 would be. I think 2000 would also be 2. And that's about right. I mean, that's about where we are on the engine dyno. Richard, have you ever had any experience with the Boss 6.2 engines? I have not ever done anything with them. A boat load may be similar to a dyno. A boat, actually, I think is worse. What I see people do in boats is running them at wide open throttle, going across the lake or up the river or whatever for a lot longer times than we do on the dyno. I think a boat is actually way worse. But the nice thing about the boat is, like the engine dyno, there's usually plenty of, at least ambient air, whatever that ambient temperature. Sometimes it's 100 degrees if they're at the river or whatever. They have lots of cold water, though, and I think that helps. I don't have a favorite engine. My favorite engine is always the next one that I get to test. The oil doesn't slosh around on the dyno. That's true if you're road racing and stuff. I think that's less of a problem under a drag race situation. Hopefully, guys would have baffled pans and stuff that would take care of that. Can you test the Chinese fake Holly and Edelbrock carbs? Are they making duplicates of those? Richard, very interested why almost all Mustang places say 463 valve won't live long past 450 rear wheel torque. That's why I sent the video to you. Are guys making more than that? Is that what you're saying? I don't understand the correlation between the things that you're talking about. Texas Speed doesn't have comp grind their cams. Texas Speed grinds their own cams. What cam would you recommend for a big block Chevy 535 Gen 7 for 6,000 redline and 600 horsepower? I don't know. I don't have a lot of experience with running that size motor in a Gen 7. I don't know what heads you have on it. The stock heads are not going to support what you're doing there. So I'm assuming that you have some kind of aftermarket head. But if we look at the 540 stuff, a conventional motor 540, with good heads, it doesn't really take much to make 600 horsepower. I mean, even on a 496, it takes a 250 at 50 camshaft and good heads and a 496 to make 600 or more horsepower. And a 535 is going to be, it's going to be even easier. Todd, welcome back. Sebastian, somebody's running a 327 to 13,000 RPM. He's going to need all the titanium he can get. All 700 of them? Nice. You're ditching the Gen 7 in your Pacer, an all-wheel drive Pacer? How do the air fuel systems work compared to the Gen 7? I don't know what you mean by air fuel systems. Are you talking about the intake manifolds? Both of them use port injection manifolds. The manifolds are obviously different in a Gen 6 versus a Gen 7. The heads are completely different. I think the deck height's different too. BTR is not done by Comp. Comp doesn't do BTR cams. I'm building a 70s Mini for my daughter. Very cool. And it's going to have a B series in it. That will be cool. It's the 8.8. Yeah, I'm a little bit familiar with those. Guys have been talking to me about those, but I don't know what is that head flow. Are they stock 8.8 heads? Hot mess. The GT45 on a Hemi 5.8. What's a 5.8? A 5.7, or is it board or something? The GT45 is a 700 horsepower turbo or 750 thereabouts. So if that's how much power you want to make, you can. Personally, I think it's a little bit small for a Hemi. Underdog. Okay, okay. Now I get what you're saying. So you're saying that people say that you can't go past 450 rear wheel torque or they won't last. Okay, I get that. And the video I sent say over 15 years of boosting these motors, that's what the rule of thumb is. Good. I think that that's great. I think that that you should go by that. Then if that's if you think that that's true, then you should go by that. If that's what people are saying, and that they've done extensive testing and durability testing on these, and they say that it won't last, then, and they've been breaking them if they go beyond that, then that's a good rule of thumb. You should go by that. Almost had a bad time. Just caught myself with a rod installed backwards on a piston. Yeah, I cannot. I don't know if you're like me. I cannot have people around while I'm assembling stuff. I cannot be talking to people. I cannot be watching things. I cannot be distracted. I have to just be 100% focused on like putting a motor together. How's our poll doing? 82%. Saying yes, modify. At least needs another intake on the other side. Oh, that's what I wanted to look at. I wanted to look at I was thinking of milling all of the top stuff off of one of these Gen 7 manifolds and making a big common plenum up there with two 4500 or 4150 at least carb spacers on there, so you could run it as a dual quad, and then obviously a short runner. Where's the lower portion of this thing? I think that could work. Mill all that off and then a plate, and then have everything come up. That would be good. Utah, I don't know I've never done a testing on finding out where the studs pull out at. The thing that I don't know about that is, is I don't know how consistent the sealing on the stud, like the strength of the stud and its adherence to the cylinder head. I don't know how consistent that is. I don't know if the process that they use, or core shift, or the machining, or the exact metallurgy, if like one or two of the studs may pull out with 150 pounds of seat pressure, or 350 or 370 pounds of open pressure, or a 1.8 rocker or whatever, like one of them will pull out, but all the rest of them will be fine. Like if you do have one that, and I would suspect this to be true, do you have one that's the weak link? And it's almost always like that. You have one bad rocker or one bad push rod that's for whatever reason weirder than the others. I would think that would be the case. I don't know where that is. I've run some small block stuff where we've put spring upgrades on them and we've run cams on them, and they had Preston studs. It was never a lot, and they were always usually small hydraulic flat tapping cams. But I don't know where that limit is. Richard, I guess I'm curious about the power potential between the two. Obviously, anything can be modified, but I just don't see myself spending gobs of money necessary to purchase radar parts. Yeah, that stuff's not cheap. I'm scrolling back to find. Oh, okay, yeah. Well, a Gen 6 or Gen 5 or Mark 4 is certainly going to have a lot more aftermarket support. I forgot a rod bearing one time. Another stuck to me. Yeah, it's not good. I get that way when I'm like lashing valves and stuff. That's why I don't. Some guys like to follow the firing order or whatever. I just go down the line. This one and then this one and then this one and this one but If I walk away while I'm doing that, I have to start from the beginning again because I don't remember if it's this one or this one. And whatever one I pick, it's going to be the wrong one. Richard was supposed to be 7, fat figure of the 8, so go with the pair. It's close to 11-1. We'll be on 85. Not sure how much boost is stock block can handle and still keep it semi-daily. I'm going to scroll back because I already forgot what that was. I'm scrolling. Where is a hot mess? There, I already passed it. That's what happens too. I'll be scrolling and I'll go past it. I won't be able to find it because I already went past it. Now I'm scrolling back down because I think I went past it. Trying to find out. I got nothing. I got something. Oh, a GT45. I wouldn't put 2 of them on there. That's what it was. Okay. I wouldn't put 2 GT45s because that's like 1,400 horsepower worth of turbo, unless you're trying to do that power level. Otherwise, all you're doing is just adding lag to it. I would just put one single that's better, that supplies the power level that you want to be at. Have you been to the Texas Mile? I haven't run the Texas Mile. I've only been to the Maxton Mile back in North Carolina. And I've done some stuff like this thing. This was at Lemoore Naval Air Station. And I've been to Bonneville and El Mirage. And I think that those are the only ones. I put music on, turn the phone. And yeah, that's the other thing is I can't have the phone because I'll want to look something up and then people call and all that. Richard, what's your take on spraying down the head gaskets with copper just prior to putting the heads on? I don't do that on a new build. I have done that on reusing head gaskets. Down to 80%. People are changing their mind about the intake. I have to say though, having the phone when you're assembling stuff, especially if you do a bunch of different things like I do, that being able to look up a rod bolt torque spec or that kind of thing is good. Yeah, hot mess for sub 1000. I would put a 7875 or a S475 or something. Can you run a 6.2 cam and a 6.0? If you're talking about an LS, then yes. All of the LS cams interchange. There's some weird things. It's not a fitment thing, but some of them have a provision for a rear cam sensor, and some of them do not. So if you put a camshaft in that doesn't have a rear cam sensor because it has a front cam sensor, so it's doing it off of the timing gear, and you're putting it in like a Gen 3 block, then that's not going to work, or you're going to have to put a different timing gear on it. The PSI heads are said to flow 288. I think you're going to have a hard time. That'd be a lot of horsepower per CFM on those heads if you're trying to get 600. It's probably possible given that displacement, but it'd be a lot easier if those heads were ported. Have you ever had problems with engines running into surge when doing big bang stuff? The big bang stuff hasn't been a problem, I don't think, with any of them. Maybe with the first 76 millimeters that we were running. Otherwise, I don't think so. I'm trying to think back where we were trying to run maybe something big on something small. The closest thing I could think of is when we put that 76 millimeter on the B series, maybe on that, but we didn't roll into it until fairly late in the RPM range where it was had enough so that it would cross over. I'm hoping Big Red takes out the GT40's record this year. What is the record for? Are you talking about Big Red going 300 this year? That's not going to happen. Richard, I found out that I had to retorque the head on my Ecotech after several heat cycles when I sprayed the head gasket down with copper. I don't know what head gasket you were using. Most of the stuff anymore we run MLS head gaskets on, and I don't normally retorque those. Although on that seemed to be the problem, according to Ben at the car forum, but that was not an MLS head gasket. It had head studs on it on the 2.2 that I had in the Omni, but the head gasket leaked. They changed the head gasket, but when they went to do that, they said that the head studs were loose. And we went 50, 75, and 90 on those, but we did not retorque them after heat cycling the things a few times. We did this time, but we had the Felpro or the Mopar head gasket on it. I can't decide between a sloppy stage 2 and a truck Norris cam for a 240, 6-liter T56 S480. I definitely would pick the truck Norris for that and not the sloppy stage 2. An S480 on a 6-liter with a truck Norris will be, and especially since it's a stick, you're going to want the thing to be more responsive, and that camshaft is going to be much more responsive than a sloppy stage 2 will. Richard, I wasn't trying to upset you. Just thought it was informational to the channel, but you're not interested in Ford content. I don't know why. Nope, that's me. I'm not interested in Ford content. I have a 5-liter Mustang. I've written several 5-liter or Ford books. There's a ton of Ford content on there, but yeah, sure, I'm not interested in, and a modular book. I forgot about that too. In fact, I had that here. That's not accurate. Richard, if I shipped you my GM big block Chevy, would you work on a piece of GM history? I don't know what you're talking about. Richard, could you put a balance tube in the exhaust pipes before twin turbos? Do you think this might help with turbo lag? I don't know why it would. I don't know why a balance pipe would change that. The exhaust flow from each side of the motor should be fairly balanced, should be fairly even. But I don't know, even if it wasn't, if one side was a little bit, because it can't be very much. If it is, you'd notice it. If one side is a little bit more than the other and having a balance tube between the two, I don't know how that's going to help spool. I don't know what it would do. Richard, I've recently realized Engine Masters is done at West Tech. Yeah, it is. I think I've seen them referenced on other shows. What do they do there? That's where they do all the filming. All the Engine Masters episodes are filmed at West Tech. I've been on a couple of them, and they do all the testing there. I don't have any affiliation other than them asking me to be on the show occasionally. So we're going to end our poll at 80%. Who brought this up about the underdog? I'm actually glad that you said that stuff, because that's important. I went through this actually several times over earlier this week, and it's people have contacted me, email or messages on Facebook or whatever, and they want my opinion about something, and I give my opinion about something, and then they want to change my opinion. I'm like, look, you asked what I would do, and I told you what I would do, and then now you want that to be different. You asked my opinion, I gave it to you. That's all I'm going to do. I'm not going to argue with you about whether that's perfect or exact or whatever. That's what I would do. If I had the thing that you're trying to do, I would do this camshaft and this intake manifold or this turbo or whatever. They should just ask, hey, look, I'm doing this. Is this okay? Yes, that's fine. That'll work fine. I don't care. But if you ask somebody's opinion about something and they give that to you, you should accept that. It doesn't have to, it's not an argument between you and the other person. It's not a they're saying your thing is bad or I'm saying my thing is better. That's not it at all. If you ask my opinion about something, I'll give it to you, but then don't try to alter that and make and steer me to your opinion, because we don't have to agree. We can have differences of opinion and it's still all fine. It's still all good. Richard had Felpro MLS 27,000. That's pretty thin on Ecotech with ARP head. Says I torqued them originally 20, 40, 60, 80, retorqued to 100 when I found moisture in the oil when I changed the oil. Well, this is a good question, and I don't know the answer to this because I don't ever remember running a Quadrajet or a spread bore Holly to see if it does the cool Quadrajet noise. I don't know if it does that or not. I think a lot of people want to be told that they're right, and they are. And the thing is that the thing that they're not realizing in the situation is that they are right. If somebody asked me what cam I would use, and I tell them I would use a Truck Norris, and they want to use a Chupacabra, which is kind of the same thing, or a Sloppy Stage 2, or whatever they want to use, they're right. It's their thing, and they get to do whatever they want. They ask what I would do, and that's my opinion. And what they did ultimately on their thing, they're right. That's their deal. And I support that. I'm not going to argue with them about it. I'm not going to say, you don't know what you're doing. You have to pick this camshaft. I'm not ever going to do that. Dan, I like that. Caleb, what were you sharing? Did I miss something that you were sharing? Because I like when people share. I'm very excited about the 396. I found another set of heads for it. The heads are for, and I maybe Turbo or Vet guys here. I found another set of heads for it. They are they're not a 291 casting, an earlier casting. They're actually the casting for the LS6, for the 70 LS6, closed chamber, big valve, rec port. But those heads came with a 188 exhaust and not the 172 or 176 exhaust like they did in the 396. I need to see if they'll fit. I don't know how much the valve will change. I would like to get, because I can put those heads on, and it's going to be a while before the LS6 is put together anyway. I could put those heads on and run the L78. I don't know what that exhaust valve size change would do. I don't suspect it would do much at this kind of power level, but I'm curious. I love the Gen 4 versus Gen 7. Any chance you could try the Edelbrock ProFlow 4? I don't have that, or Harley Sniper EFI on both engines to test possible power gains. If you're talking about some sort of 4-hole throttle body, or an intake change could definitely change power. If you're talking about the 4-hole throttle body thing, that's going to require a different intake manifold, and whatever the intake manifold is going to be the thing that changes the power curve. After the retorque, it was all good. That's cool. That's good to know. I we didn't put. I don't think we copper coated the because the head gasket, the Felpro one, was not an MLS that we put on the 2.2. It was just whatever the blue stuff is. Scott, see, Scott knows about quadrajets. The spreadbore Holly does not sound like the quadrajet. It's a secondary or air door that makes a sound. See, that's why we got people to come here that know stuff. Richard, does higher compression on turbo LS like 11-to-1 make it harder to tune fuel injection? It's not harder. It's just that your window of what's safe and not safe gets much, much smaller. I would never do that kind of compression if I was putting the motor together to run it with a turbo. I wouldn't run that compression. I would, especially if it's going to be a street car, I would rather have it be safe, because you can with a turbo, that's the nice thing about having is you can always make the power. You are never going to be at a loss for power on a turbo application. So I would not go from 10-to-1 to 11-to-1 because you're going to get a little bit more response and a little bit more power. You have all of that you need. Richard, when do we get to see the 2.2 on the dyno? As soon as we get it running. Richard, can you fly cut the cylinders? The factory 396 already has a notch in it, if that's what you're talking about. Caleb, the heads that I have are 291s, I think. And then these are, I need to look at the part number on these. I'll have to look it up. Arizona Speed Marine did make a TPI for the big block. I remember seeing their big tunnel ram thing. It kind of like the one that they used on the like a ZZ502 or something like that on from GM. I think you might have tried the Dart dual plane on an 8.1. I haven't yet. I loaned it to my buddy Andy, and he ran it on a motor that he was running on the dyno on an 8.1. But it was an HO version that was going in a boat. He just wanted to make sure that it was okay. We didn't compare it to anything, so I don't really know yet. Dave, a TBI sounds like a quadrajet. Hot mess. The cylinder reliefs are on the intake side. I think that they're for the intake valve. For the big intake valve on the small bore, I think. But I don't want to notch the bore even more because I want it to be, I do want it to be factory. Have you thought of running a first TPI on a 400 small block? I don't know about, I don't have a 400, so I can't do it on that. If we were going to run one, we would run one on some 350 or something that was at the shop. How much ring gap for NA? I would look at the ring manufacturer's suggestion. They send you a little card usually with the rings. .840 heads. I have 107 cc chamber. .67 to 69. You need as much horsepower and torque as possible under 5,000 RPM. Then you should do a big block. and not a LS or a small block. What kind of idle vacuum is this? 550 flat cam iron head dual plane 6500 RPM 454 going to have? If you're still making power at but 6500 RPM, it's not going to have very good idle. I don't know what the effect is going to the bigger exhaust valve. I don't know if that will change much. Should I swap 799 to 8 from 823 heads for low end torque? They will make more low speed torque. They definitely will. And on that note, it is time to go. But I will be back tomorrow. If you have not, please go take a look at the video that I put up. Big block battle, which is all good stuff. Richard, are you trying to build the 69 L78 3967 or a 70? This is actually a 402. You know, 11-to-1, solid flat tappet, rectangular port head, closed chamber. The it's like a 363 or something, and the 780 intake, and then the 780 carburetor. You know, that sort of thing.